The story begins with a dark introduction of our main character, Joo-Young. He's a loser who is always the target of people bigger than him. He has lived his life full of beatings from a person who was supposed to be his father. But at this time of the day, Joo-Young is a juvenile prisoner for the attempted murder of his own dad. You may think he's a strong guy, but he's an underdog in this prison. His days of beating have never ended because even without the presence of his abusive father, the juvenile prison is even worse. It is a facility in South Korea where atrocious delinquent teens are gathered in one place. If you want to see violence and crimes happening daily, a juvenile prison is where it's at. In our protagonist's dorm, Sung-ho is the room's president. We can see Sung-ho playing with Joo-Young, putting a target on his face while aiming a coin with a rubber band. Two men are holding him down so he won't run when hit, but it's clear that Joo-Young is scared and tries to negotiate that they don't have to do this. Sung-ho refused to end the fun like that, so they pointed out that Joo-Young needed the money. That's right, Joo-Young has been following their orders to earn money. Joo-Young shoveled snow for 300 won, warmed up their shoes for 100 won, and even played dog for 200 won. And this time, being a human target would get him 500 won, which is bigger than the previous ones. Determined to get the money, Joo-Young is willing to endure it because that's what he is used to anyway. Joo-Young squinted his eyes close, preparing himself for the pain he was about to get. But as if the manhwa gods gave him a break, the rubber band broke, and the coin flew towards the toilet. Sung-ho asked the others for other rubber bands, but those things are rare in prison, which was good to hear if you're in Joo-Young's place. Sung-ho asked him to pick up the coin, which he did almost immediately. However, Sung-ho can't let him go that easily, so he tells Joo-Young to pick it up with his mouth. Worst case scenario, one of their dorm mates had diarrhea yesterday, but that ain't gonna stop our protagonist, who lost his self-value at this point. Even the dorm mates can't even look at him doing it, but for MC, that 500 won coin is the last coin for him to earn 50,000 won. It was already rec time, so the inmates were on their way outside while they told Joo-Young to get out slowly because he smelled like crap. The inmates were questioning why Joo-Young had to stoop that low for money, thinking he got some debt. But the reason for that is more. After a few minutes, a guard called out to Joo-Young, informing him that he had a visitor. He already knew who it was, so he went to the visiting cubicle. The woman in front of him is Dae-yeon, his childhood friend and the only person who visits him. Seeing his thin face, Dae-yeon was concerned that he was not fed well in prison or was still getting beaten. Joo-Young denied that assumption and said it isn't like that, but Dae-yeon already knows. She reminded him to make a scary impression so nobody would mess with him. Joo-Young didn't listen to her sermon and asked why she was visiting him so often. But Dae-yeon angrily said that she was not some beggar for him to give him a jar full of coins. She told him that she doesn't accept suspicious cash, but she knew well that it was because of the promise they made to each other. They promised to live in Seoul together once they graduate high school. Dae-yeon emphasized that she can take care of herself, so he should also prioritize getting out of there. Just a few minutes of talking visiting hours have ended, so Joo-Young waves her goodbye while she ends their meeting with her rant. Before we go to Joo-Young's time in prison, let's see what really happened when he ended up as a juvenile. It all went down when Dae-yeon was badly beaten by his dad, and they all ended up in the hospital. Not because Dae-yeon was badly hurt, but because Joo-Young hit his father with a flower pot so hard that he was comatose. It would be a miracle if he's gonna wake up with that kind of state. They knew that the police wouldn't go easy on him, but Joo-Young was confident that his self-defense would be overlooked. But in the end, the court ruled that he should spend 3 years in juvenile detention, something that he didn't expect. It may seem unfair that the one time he fought back gave him that kind of punishment, but there's not much he could do about it. In prison, if a person were to cause trouble, they'd get an extension of the sentence, so he behaved himself so his sentence would be deducted. His only source of will is Dae-yeon, and as expected, Sung-ho won't let him breathe for a second. He saw him watching a photo with a girl and teased him. He was about to hurt him again, but a guard came and he stopped. The guard informed the inmates that they got a fresh one, someone that Sung-ho had known before with a reputation for murdering 7 delinquents. This guy's name is Ma-jeom, and it's because of that he was sentenced to juvenile prison. The inmates were scared of him except for Sung-ho, who bravely approached Ma-jeom. His intention was to tell the freshie that it was him who was the boss in that room, expecting Ma-jeom to do his orders. But Ma-jeom refused to do so, which earned him a beating from Sung-ho. They were surprised that Ma-jeom wasn't fighting back, so they laughed because he was nothing but another loser. All the time that Joo-Young refuses to follow their orders, they beat him up, so that night, Joo-Young advises him to shut up and do as Sung-ho says. But Joo-Young doesn't want to live submissively, unlike him. Joo-Young felt offended, but living submissively is all he has to do until he gets out of that place. A few days later, Dae-in decided to give Joo-Young a lunchbox, and just when she was a few walks away from the juvenile prison building, she was hit by a truck and unfortunately died. That same day, one guard informed Joo-Young and his world fell apart. He wasn't doing anything when he got back to their dorm, and Sung-ho was mad because he didn't clean up their toilet. They heard the rumors about his friend, but there was no way he could overlook his situation and feelings. Sung-ho then decided to take the photo that Joo-Young was staring at and opened a bidding for it among the inmates. One of them asked if Sung-ho were to date the woman in the picture, and he replied that it would be impossible to do so now that she was dead. But if she was breathing, he would surely have plenty of fun with her. Joo-Young stayed silent as the inmates were talking ill towards Dae-in, but that didn't last long because Joo-Young decided to end it all. He punched Sung-ho in the face, which left everyone surprised, including Joo-Young. Part of him expected this, especially when Joo-Young knew that Joo-Young had hospitalized his father, who was the right-hand man of a gang boss, because he had messed with Dae-in. Once again, he went berserk. Those years of beatings from his father didn't go to waste. It's because of him that he learned how to fight. Joo-Young has the capability to knock out everyone who comes at him, and he shows no mercy to Sung-ho. He tries to offer Joo-Young more money, but since there's no reason for him to save anymore, he is done being the underdog. As we take a step back from MC's childhood, every day is an assault from his father, who wants him to follow in his footsteps and become a gangster, which is the reason why he always beats up his son. His father has a dragon tattoo on his chest, a trophy of his strength, something that Joo-Young despises. It was already within him to be a cold-blooded murderer, which was only awakened now for the second time. A guard quickly went inside their dorm because of the noises, only to be greeted with a bloody surrounding. He couldn't believe it in his eyes that Joo-Young was the one who did it. But he admitted his mistake and served his time in solitary. Throughout his time there, he couldn't help but think of the time when he and Dae-in made their promise. It was the first day of school, and Joo-Young was looking beaten up again, thanks to his father. Dae-in could no longer tolerate his father's actions and said that she was going to speak to his dad. Joo-Young looked at her and firmly told her to keep her promise and stay away from their house, or else she'd call him Appa. Besides, they were going to graduate high school soon, and Dae-in wanted to move to Seoul and bring Joo-Young with him. And that is the birth of their promise. That was also the same day that they got a picture together, something Joo-Young cherished so much. However, this time, it only brought him pain and regret. He blames himself for her death, and he punishes himself by punching the wall until it bleeds. The guard outside could no longer overlook his pain, even though he felt sorry for him, telling Joo-Young that they had no choice but to live on. Meanwhile, in the cafeteria, Joo-Young overheard other inmates talking about Joo-Young taking down their boss because his girlfriend got into a car accident. They were laughing at his situation, but Joo-Young kept silent, except for this other inmate who approached them and caused trouble. This inmate's name is Park Jong-shin, someone who doesn't want others to talk tea without him, especially since he's their boss. A week later, Joo-Young got out of solitary while Sung-ho was still in the hospital. The guards were considering his situation, so they decided to let him out early. The moment Joo-Young got back to their room, Joo-Young was worried that the other inmates weren't gonna go easy on him. But to his surprise, they greeted him with princess treatment, as if Joo-Young was now their boss. With that, Joo-Young was keeping it recorded in his notebook. He realized that strength is the only way to survive in prison, unlike the usual unspoken rules in school. After a few hours, the inmates were given time in the prison field, where Joo-Young approached Joo-Young, who was just silently writing in his notebook. Joo-Young wanted to ask him why he stopped him while he was beating out the room leader when he had murdered 7 people before. The image of Joo-Young on the day of the incident flashed in his mind, and his eyes were full of regret. He was about to answer Joo-Young when another room leader, Park Jong-shin, called out for Joo-Young. He was acting arrogant towards Joo-Young, asking why he beat up their room leader, thinking that Joo-Young was after the title. But he doesn't really give a damn about it, which surprised Jong-shin, but at the same time, got him mad about the way he talked to him. He felt insulted, so he kicked Joo-Young in his balls to teach him a lesson. A guard passed by and broke their fight, but for some reason he left without scolding them. Jong-shin was beating up Joo-Young, wanting him to prove himself worthy of being the new room leader. Jong-chin wanted to go all out toward Joo-Young, so he rolled up his sleeve, revealing his dragon tattoo. That caught MHC's eye, and he noticed that it was similar to his father's tattoo. The trauma came crashing down on NC. Aside from messing with his friend, who is now gone, that dragon tattoo would surely make him go furious. That's when he decided to fight back and got Jong-chin eating dirty almost instantly. He was rendered helpless and weak now that Joo-Young fought back that no matter how many times he begged, Joo-Young didn't stop until Jong-chan was unconscious. It was hard for Joo-Young to be the son of a gangster, especially when he was walking in the street with his beaten-up face. But the day he went home to see Dae-yeon unconscious on the floor is the day he awakened. Dae-yeon barges into their house and spouts nonsense at Joo-Young's father, so he teaches her a lesson and beats her up like he usually does. Even though enduring is what he does best, at that moment, he could no longer keep it. With the iconic flower pot, he put his father into the hospital with a coma. The doctor's words were, "You could say there's almost zero chance of him waking up, unless there's a miracle." Hearing that relieved me, but I guess it won't be for long. The moment Joo-Young beat Jong-chan's face in front of the other inmates proved that he was somebody not to mess with. A few minutes later, the inmates were told to return to their rooms, but someone from the other side of the building was watching him cause some trouble. The Juvenile Detention Center got a special guest that same day, and the warden, Kwon Chan-seok, especially welcomed him after their guest was recently discharged from the hospital. His presence is sudden, so the warden asks him who he's seen that day, but seeing this silhouette, we already know that this is a certain someone's dad. On the other hand, back in Joo-Young's room, they were kneeling across from each other in silence, while Ma-jeom still had his notebook and writing down his thoughts. The inmates weren't sure how to react now that Joo-Young had made another mess right after he got back from solitary. A few moments later, a guard called upon Joo-Young, telling him that he has a visitor. He was not expecting someone to see him now that Dae-yeon was gone. It couldn't be his mother since she left him while he was young, and it couldn't be a relative. As they were walking, he noticed that they were going to the warden's office and not the usual visiting cubicle. Behind the shadow was a man who was happy to see his son, Cha Kang-ryong. Joo-Young was not expecting him of all people, so he was stunned at his feet with the warden next to him. He was an ally with Kang-ryong, which was no surprise for someone who was part of a gang. Kang-ryong pointed out that nobody in his lifetime had put him in that much danger. Not his enemies, not even the police. But the only biggest mortal threat he has is, ironically, his son. However, instead of hating Joo-Young, he was actually genuinely happy. That is the only time Kang-ryong was proud of his son, which gave Joo-Young an unfamiliar feeling that his face was unreadable. After that heartwarming speech, Kang-ryong decided to drop the bomb and confess that he was the one who murdered Dae-yeon. As we get closer to what happened that day, Dae-yeon sees Kang-ryong in the distance while she asks for help, but seeing that it is him, fear covers her eyes. In her last moment, this guy is heartless enough to tell her that it was him who Joo-Young needed most as his parents and not her. Something she can't relate to because she doesn't have any. All this time, Kang-ryong thought that Joo-Young was nothing but an idiot who did nothing but endure the pain. But on that fine day, he was proven wrong, and that's when he also realized that in order for Joo-Young to awaken, it would be because of her. In the blink of an eye, Joo-Young rushed to attack Kang-ryong, and the police could barely react. However, they got their weapons, and he was quickly brought down with their electroshock gun. The warden panicked for a second there, but seeing him on the ground relieved him. Kang-ryong looked down on him and told him that if he wanted revenge and murder him, he must pave his way in doing so. Members of the organization are present at the Juvenile Detention Center. Most of them are rookies who recently just got their tattoos, and one of them is the one Joo-Young beat up earlier, Jong-chin. Those rookies will soon become the pillars of their organization, and if Joo-Young can prove that he is the best among all of them, then he must take control of that juvenile prison. If their gang would acknowledge him, then Joo-Young would one day reach his father, and by then, he would be free to cut his throat. It's Kang-ryong's wish that he can't fulfill, but seeing the capabilities of his son, he is confident that he will be the one to complete his life. After that speech, Kang-ryong was about to leave when the police who held down Joo-Young noticed him fighting back, and just before they could react, Joo-Young ran towards Kang-ryong, ready to finish him once and for all. Joo-Young couldn't stand his father roaming around freely while he suffered, so he wanted to end him without doing any of those steps. However, a man with orange hair and an X scar on his face brought down Joo-Young with one hand and held him down until Kang-ryong was safe to escape. He is the current acting boss of the Heavenly Dragon and their gang. But Joo-Young is strong enough, even for him. He was able to resist his strength and was still charging towards Kangryong. But his father made a U-turn and told him that it was pointless for him to attack him at that moment, given that he was greatly outnumbered. Acting hastily will only cause him problems unless Joo-Young will be able to prove himself in that prison. Until then, Kangryong will be looking forward to his son, leaving him in that aisle alone. Meanwhile, in the woodshop room, we can see Ma-Jeom tinkering, doing his task as told. He was so disciplined that he already reached his goal for that day, so a guard told him to take it easy. But on the other side of the room, inmates were gossiping about how Ma-Jeom used a hammer to break his bully's head. However, they concluded that Ma-Jeom didn't give out a murderer vibe and thought that he was a loser. Another inmate who was doing his task saw Ma-Jeom. This man named Yoon Gunman got a tattoo on his chest, and he's familiar with Ma-Jeom, so he decided to greet his old acquaintance. Gunman looked happy to see Ma-Jeom there, but it was the opposite of Ma-Jeom's reaction. The rumor of Ma-Jeom murdering his bullies has reached Gunman, but he wants to know if it was really him who did it. It was hard for Gunman to believe that Ma-Jeom had the capability to do something like that because he's known for being a good student. However, their talk ended early when a guard scolded the inmates. That's when Ma-Jeom realized that he was gripping the wood with a nail, something that he didn't even notice. Later that night, the inmates, including Joo-Young, went back to their room. He was on his side of the room, with his father's words haunting his mind. At this point, he is determined to rise and take control of the prison, but he doesn't know where to start. Meanwhile, the inmates on the other side of the room were getting hungry, ranting about the grass on their menu, which wasn't really feeding them. Inmate 7152 was talking about how he wished to eat a slice of pizza, which the others thought was an idiotic wish because that's impossible in a place such as a prison. However, hearing this sparked an idea for Joo-Young, so he approached the guard suddenly. The others were scared of what he was about to do, but Joo-Young firmly yet politely asked the guard if they could order pizza. The guard was looking at him like he said something very offensive, telling Joo-Young to come out. In the end, the inmates got their pizzas and enjoyed every bite of them, which they tore up. They all thanked Joo-Young for that dinner, which he didn't mind because he was just testing out the water. He assumed that the warden and the guards were giving him special treatment due to him being the son of a gangster, so he wanted to know how far that special treatment would go. Still, all he wants is to take revenge, even if he's that man's blood. As for the inmates, they weren't sure about Joo-Young's identity, so they assumed that his father must be a congressman and Joo-Young is the third-generation heir, which is why he was able to buy them that delicious pizza. The inmates noticed that Ma-Jeom wasn't eating their celebratory pizza, but they didn't annoy him much and let him be weird in the corner. Most especially, Ma-Jeom was looking dark that night, so they gave him a little space because something might have happened. The next day, back in the woodshop room, Ma-Jeom was doing his task together with Joo-Young when he noticed that one inmate's toolbox fell on top of Ma-Jeom. A bunch of nails showered down on him, and it pierced through his skin. It was Gunman saying that his hands got slippery, but Ma-Jeom was sure that he did it on purpose. The two exchanged stabbing stares until a bunch of other big fellows approached Ma-Jeom and belittled him. They expected Ma-Jeom to be bigger because of his reputation for murder, but they were disappointed to see him being little, so they thought Gunman was lying for being a popular bully. He laughed at the remark of his acquaintance and bragged how Ma-Jeom used to suck up to him since they were young. He was resurfacing Ma-Jeom's trauma by gripping his head and pushing it down to the table where the tip of a nail was waiting. His trauma of nails back then was caused when Gunman trapped him inside a locker with a bunch of nails. Gunman was outside the locker with a hammer in his hand, and even though Ma-Jeom begged him to get him out of there, Gunman was heartless and masochist for wanting to have fun with Ma-Jeom's suffering. With every hit from the hammer would stab Ma-Jeom's skin, and in the present times, as Gunman was holding down his head to hit the nail, Ma-Jeom did his best to fight back and was trembling. The other big bullies saw this and were laughing at his situation. Joo-Young was just watching them from the side as Gunman grabbed more nails to put on Ma-Jeom's head, wanting to prove so bad that his prey could never murder a person. But he was proven wrong when Ma-Jeom fought back and grabbed his hand, gripping it so tight that it stunned everyone. With those angry eyes, it's clear that Ma-Jeom no longer wants to endure. Ma-Jeom's fierce aura got Gunman scared for a second there, but things didn't escalate for long when the guard broke the fight and told them to go back to their seats. Gunman and his group left, disappointed that the fun was too short to enjoy, while Ma-Jeom and Joo-Young continued their work as if nothing happened. Back in their room, the inmates were debating on which religious leader was stronger. Is it Jesus or Buddha? Their opinions were divided. Some chose Jesus because he gave them choco pie, while others chose Buddha because he gave them burgers. That religious war was getting ridiculous, but at least it was better than having Sun Ho around. The inmates excused themselves and left Joo-Young and Mae-jim alone. They were sitting back to back in silence until Joo-Young spoke up and thanked Mae-jim for stopping him when he went berserk towards Sun Ho. Thanks to that, he wouldn't rot in that jail for another decade. Mae-jim was confused by his sudden change of heart, so Joo-Young explained that he found out his friend was murdered by his father, so he must deduct his days in that prison to meet him. Mae-jim thought his father was in a vegetative state, but Joo-Young spared the details and only thanked him without much context. Mae-jim thought he was mocking him for someone who was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Joo-Young didn't mean it that way and emphasized that he would be repaying his debt. And so Luffy and Zoro's duo fell silent once again. Later that night, Mae-jim was called by the guard in the woodshop room, who gave him the key and entrusted him with locking up the room once he was done cleaning since he had urgent things to do at home. Mae-jim understood the assignment, and that's when he noticed a moth on the table. That brought back memories of his former friend, Gunman. Back when they were 11 years old, Gunman used to collect bugs and insects to display them. Mae-jim and Gunman were childhood friends who were opposite. Gunman, who collects bugs, and Mae-jim, who hates bugs that he can't stand being near them. Still, they used to hang out a lot. When they go to middle school, Gunman is belittled and seen as a creep who collects bugs, thinking that he eats them. However, in those days, Mae-jim was the class president and defended Gunman from others who were about to mess him around. Gunman always looks forward to hanging out with Mae-jim at his house, but one time, those bullies invited Mae-jim to play soccer. Mae-jim refused to play since he had plans with Gunman, but gave in eventually. And that was the start of Gunman's villain origin. They grew apart, and Mae-jim didn't realize it. The next year of school, the two were assigned to separate classes. Mae-jim was about to visit him when he overheard Gunman's classmates say how the loser Gunman had been targeted by the bullies lately. Worst of all, Gunman was dragged by them to the warehouse. Mae-jim immediately sprinted towards the warehouse, worried that something might have happened to his friend. When he got there, the bullies greeted him with Gunman nowhere in sight. That's when he sensed a menacing aura behind him, and it was the now changed Gunman. He pushed Mae-jim inside a locker and locked him up, which confuses Mae-jim as to why he was doing it so suddenly. Apparently, the bullies tasked him to capture his precious insects successfully so Gunman could join their family. The bullies laughed at how out of his mind Gunman was that despite the pleas from his friend, he didn't show mercy. He isn't done though, because according to Gunman, once he captured his insects, he taxidermized them alive. Their friendship is like moths and butterflies, one is hated while the other is loved. The moth was Gunman, and the butterfly was Mae-jim. He blames everything on Mae-jim, including his turning into a monster. This is all because Gunman thinks that Mae-jim is acting like a saint who cares about his friend, but secretly, he is planning on distancing himself from him. It's true that Mae-jim was glorified by others and earned respect as a class president, unlike Gunman, who was still seen as a loser who collects bugs. When Gunman heard the news that Mae-jim became a murderer, he felt really happy because it felt like a poetic justice that isn't the only man with bad intentions. But Mae-jim told him that he was just being delusional. However, that doesn't really matter for Gunman because he's there to end him once again. The other inmates appeared and strained Mae-jim, who was having fun with Gunman's plan. Mae-jim was once again put in a locker, helpless, which was nostalgic and traumatic for him. However, this time, there is a twist. Not only was Mae-jim about to suffer from the nails, but the locker was also filled with bugs and insects, something Gunman knows that Mae-jim hates. He was listening intently from the outside, mocking if Mae-jim liked his time inside the locker, but to his dismay, there was no response. It surprised Gunman that Mae-jim was really holding it all in, and the other guys were laughing at how their prey was holding back out of spite. Moreover, one of the inmates asked Gunman if he would be okay since their chosen target for their play was a murderer. Gunman didn't listen and didn't really care what Mae-jim had done. Things were just starting for Gunman, so he was preparing to hear Mae-jim scream until his vocal cords would rip open. However, an unfamiliar voice spoke up, and it was Joo-Young, appearing out of nowhere. He asked Gunman how they were going to make Mae-jim scream, so he attacked their ally to demonstrate it for him. The inmates didn't react that much and charged an attack towards Joo-Young immediately, but he easily took them all down like he was fighting with kids. Joo-Young told Ma-jeom that he was doing it as a form of payback, and now that he has taken them down, they're even now. Earlier that night, the inmates from the room noticed that Ma-jeom wasn't present, and one of them said that the supervisor called him to the woodshop room since he needed help with the cleanup late at night. Joo-Young was silently listening to them when he suddenly stood up and approached the guard again. The inmates thought that Joo-Young would ask for more real food, but they were surprised and disappointed when he ordered the guard to open the door. That's when he caught up with Gunman in his action and stopped him to save his roommate to repay his debt. One of Gunman's acquaintances, the biggest of them all, was familiar with Joo-Young. He was now known as someone who was stirring up trouble lately, and since he had seen him with Ma-jeom a few days before, he concluded that they must be close. Gunman envies Ma-jeom to have someone he can rely on, like Joo-Young, and seeing how he was pretty loyal to Ma-jeom, big inmate 6127 also wants to be friends with him. Of course, while also aiming his fist at his face. However, Joo-Young isn't someone who can easily be taken down, so before the big inmate could react, Joo-Young pushed him to the ground. Joo-Young emphasized that he would rather die than be friends with someone like him. Now that the big guy was taken care of, he then proceeded to little blondie Gunman. He asked why he was doing it to Ma-jeom, pointing out that he had gone too far in torturing him. Gunman disagrees and calls Ma-jeom a traitor, blaming him for making his life miserable by pretending to be a good, affectionate childhood friend, but stabs him in the back, dragging him down like a snake. He uses his experience as a warning to Joo-Young that when he's with him, he should always watch his back. And there it is, the big inmate was back on his feet and attacked Joo-Young from behind, strangling his neck with his impressive grip. Big inmate 6127 was still convincing Joo-Young to be his friend while Joo-Young was struggling to breathe. His only way to get out of that grip was to break his finger, but before he could do so, Gunman interrupted and stabbed Joo-Young with an object. Torturing a person is considered a fun game for big inmate 6127, and he complimented Gunman for being a fun friend. While they were enjoying that moment, they didn't notice that Ma-jeom was out of the locker and strangled big inmate 6127 with the chain used to lock him up. Gunman didn't notice that Ma-jeom had escaped from the locker, but it was thanks to Joo-Young for kicking someone towards the locker, who broke the lock. With teamwork, Joo-Young was able to get loose from the big inmate's grip and kicked Gunman to the ground. Meanwhile, Ma-jeom wasn't done with the big inmate, who was clearly struggling yet chose to fight back. They thought they gained the upper hand, but the more big inmate 6127 moved and tensed up his neck, the more he's gonna strain the chain and snap his neck. The big inmate refused to give up, but with Ma-jeom's technique, he was already done for. All there was left was Gunman, so with a piercing stare, he approached Gunman while he pleaded for his life that he was just a victim. He was gaslighting Ma-jeom that it was his fault since the start, saying that it was just self-defense when this blondie was clearly gonna torture him. With such a menacing aura, Gunman tripped on his feet, not handling this vibe from Ma-jeom. Still begging to be spared, the dude kneeled down and apologized to Ma-jeom, telling himself that he was a loser who had lost his mind. However, Ma-jeom looked down on him and explained that he had never seen Gunman as a loser. But a selfish victim mentality isn't gonna change the fact that he has ruined his life. Ma-jeom has already murdered 7 people, and he's thinking of doing it again with Gunman. But seeing him in that situation made Ma-jeom realize that he doesn't hate him that much because they were friends. That word pissed off Gunman though, going back to his psychotic mentality when Joo-Young kicked his head unconscious. It was just payback for stabbing him though. The reason why Ma-jeom still couldn't hurt Gunman is because of the talk he had with Joo-Young earlier. He may not know what really happened to their friendship, but seeing how Ma-jeom whistled out towards Gunman, he advised him not to consider him as an enemy. Right after Joo-Young knocked out Gunman, he turned around and noticed that Ma-jeom was still there. He limps towards him when Ma-jeom suddenly says his thanks to Joo-Young. He was surprised by that sudden reaction. However, their wholesome moment wasn't continued when they heard an unfamiliar voice behind him. Gunman's room leader, inmate 2163, found him unconscious on the floor, scolding his lifeless body for leaving their room without permission. You may have thought that their leader was just concerned, but nope. This man punched him again and again because Gunman forgot to clean their bathroom, and he saw a cockroach. He's scared of them because this psycho has severe OCD and hates germs more than his enemies. Joo-Young and Ma-jeom were stunned to see him throwing a tantrum on an already beaten up Gunman. His blood splattered on his face, which made him even more angry because now he's getting dirty. Inmate 2163 saw Joo-Young and grabbed his shirt to wipe off the blood on his face, not to beat him up. He then asked him if it was clean now, looking all menacing. Joo-Young was too brutally honest and said that it was very filthy, which made inmate 2163's face angrier. That word made him angry, so he was about to beat up Joo-Young, only to get caught by a guard. He firmly commanded them to get back to their rooms quickly. However, they remained standing as inmate germaphobe was chanting out Joo-Young's inmate number, 7199, as if carving it into his mind so he wouldn't forget. The next day, it was already training time, so most of the inmates were outside. For some reason, Joo-Young was flocked by his roommates even though they weren't in their room. Inmate 8671, named Juvenile, replied that they were flocking because of Joo-Young. The others who are in the field looking at them are full of gossip, because it seems like Joo-Young made quite an impression when he beat up Jongchan. And because of that rumor, the inmates from room 36 chose to gather around him so nobody would pick a fight with them. Joo-Young could care less about the rumors and what his roommates would do, as long as it wouldn't bother him by finding the people with a blue dragon adorned with red flowers, also known as the Red Flower Dragon. Namin noticed him looking out for a while, so he asked what he was looking at. He was confident that he could be of help to Joo-Young since people call him the info broker, so Joo-Young immediately said that he was looking for a filthy tattoo. As the sun was setting, the inmates went back to their room, where they were watching the news on the TV. It was about a youth circle of crimes rising, and gang groups were extorting money and valuables, which isn't new in their world. Hearing that news made Joo-Young pissed, and they said that criminals should rot in jail for hundreds of years. But that sounds a little too insensitive, given that everyone in that room did a crime or two. Namin decided to stop the awkwardness and shared that just because they're there doesn't mean they're all bad guys like him, for example. He then shared the reason why he was sentenced to prison. He started off by saying that there was a legendary tteokbokki place in their neighborhood that he was a regular in because the chewness of the rice cake was god tier. However, that all went downhill when a local congressman's son decided to eat at that place, acting all thug and confident because of his father's influence. The man ordered a serving of tteokbokki, only to be disappointed because it was rice cake tteokbokki and not flour cakes, which was the only acceptable tteokbokki for his ton. Since it didn't meet his expectations, he and his gang trashed the place. Thankfully, Namin was there to defend the family and the shop. He is like the leader of the rice cake gang, and as the fight ended, he came out with victory. Unfortunately, the congressman's son used his father's connection to put Namin in that juvenile prison. One of the inmates laughed at him, knowing that it was one of his lies again. Apparently, Namin earned the nickname Gullshutter because of the many lies he has made. It was also because of that same reason that he was beaten up in his previous room. However, unlike the others, Joo-Young believes in Namin's story and says that it doesn't sound like a lie to him. Even Namin was surprised to hear someone who trusted his words. It is like an aphid that is protected by the ants, just like his relationship with the bullies. He is like the weasel next to the bully, but having to live his whole life like that, he is certain that the real boss in their room is really Joo-Young. He felt assured to be trusted by someone like him, so he couldn't help but laugh on his own while he did his garden task. However, he accidentally throws that piece of soil on the worst possible person to ever throw soil to. It was inmate 2163, the germaphobe prick. His yell made Namin's body take a screenshot, and his trauma resurfaced in that instance. It was inmate 2163 who beat him up from their previous room. The demonic germaphobe inmate sprints his way towards Namin, who immediately apologizes and explains his stupidity for not minding his surroundings. As usual, inmate 2163 asked if his face was clean or not. Of course, Namin was well aware to say that it's clean or else he's screwed. Inmate 2163 then smiled and said that he had already forgiven him, once while aiming an insecticide at his face and spraying it. Namin immediately screamed from the stinging pain of the insecticide in his eyes. That is when inmate 2163 spoke and asked him a favor. He chanted Joo-Young's inmate number, 7199, and since inmate 2163 knew that Namin was in the same cell as him, he wanted to deal with that guy. Inmate 2163 couldn't move on how Joo-Young told him that he was filthy, refusing to accept that after all the effort made to stay clean. And so, inmate 2163 wants Namin to deal with Joo-Young together in disinfecting him. However, something caught Namin's eyes, and it was the tattoo on inmate 2163's chest, which was the red flower dragon that Joo-Young was looking for. Later that day, we can see Joo-Young doing his daily workout while still thinking of where he could hunt down the rookies of their organization. In the middle of his workout, Nemin approached and complimented his form and handed him a grape juice to keep him going. That treatment was sudden for Joo-Young, but he stopped his workout and accepted his drink. However, looking upon the violet juice, he asked about the stuff he put in there, asking him with authority, "Who gave it to you?" Before we can proceed on what happened to Joo-Young, let's watch inmate 2163's nature and personality by going through Nemin's trauma. Back in his previous room, where a demon resides, we can see him getting held back by the other inmates while putting a funnel in his mouth. It seems like inmate 2163 was pissed because of his lies that he got dirty, and as punishment, he wanted to clean Nemin's mouth with bleach. It was a brutal torture that led to him almost getting poisoned. But all inmate 2163's concern is the contents that were dripping on the floor while he tortured the room's weasel. Back in the present, there was an insecticide nearby, so Joo-Young had to know what was inside that drink. Nemin was stuttering as he explained that he bought the juice with his own money, but the inmates were saying that he was acting suspicious, thinking he must have drugged it. It was also sudden that Nemin gave him a drink, and Nemin thought Joo-Young suspected him. Part of him already knew he'd be suspected, given the image that he has among the inmates, so it's only natural. However, Joo-Young was not drinking the juice in one go, and he wasn't on his bingo card that day, so he was surprised. Joo-Young finished the drink and thanked them for the tasty beverage before turning around and reminding everyone that tomorrow was group cleaning day, something they should prepare for. Meanwhile, Nemin was still stunned to his feet, not even expecting that his target would drink it right away. He wished he had drugged it instead of testing out the waters first. But then Joo-Young's words of trust towards Nemin haunted him, and now he doesn't know what to do. Later that night, as the inmates were preparing their beds, Joo-Young was drawing the red flower dragon. Nemin then took the opportunity to his advantage and approached Joo-Young, asking about what he was drawing. Besides, it's not like he could say that he was trying to drug him, so for now, Nemin decided to analyze Joo-Young's behavior patterns first. To answer this question, Joo-Young then explained that it's a red flower dragon, which is a blue dragon adorned with red flowers. He also said that he'll find every bastard that has the tattoo. But then Joo-Young wondered why Nemin was suddenly talking to him, wondering if he had something to say. With that, Nemin asked him why he trusted him despite his reputation of being a liar. He should doubt liars like him first, or else he'll be in trouble. Joo-Young was silent at first, but explained that being good at deceiving others means that a person is pretty smart. And a smart person like that wouldn't make an enemy out of him with stupid lies. Those words struck Nemin in the gut, and he was speechless. Joo-Young then stood up and informed everyone that he'll turn off the lights, so they all should go to bed soon. Nemin couldn't believe that Joo-Young saw him as a smart guy, so he smirked as if he had an epiphany. The next day came, and the guards informed the inmates that the Ministry of Justice was coming for an inspection that day, so inmates should thoroughly clean. However, in the men's comfort room, we can see Nemin face to face with the OCD demon again. Inmate 2163 was disappointed that Nemin didn't do as he was told, and now he was facing the consequences. Nemin tried to get out of it by lying and said that Joo-Young regretted what he said to the S-slur, which is why he's there to apologize on behalf of Joo-Young. However, inmate 2163 was not taking his bait and knew that it was all lies, so he let his fist do the action. Inmate 2163 can't forgive what Joo-Young said to him, and most especially, he can't forgive Nemin and lash out his anger towards him. The trauma came back when inmate 2163 opened up a fresh bottle of bleach to disinfect Nemin and Joo-Young himself. He poured it on Nemin's head, which was a scary experience for him that he thought he was gonna die. That's when the voice of a hero echoed in the bathroom, asking the inmates what they were doing in the bathroom when it was so damn dirty. It was Joo-Young who didn't fail to tell inmate 2163 that he was filthy. Nemin was thankful that he came, even though he was a little bit late that he got beaten up for it. The night prior that day, as Joo-Young was cleaning the hallway, Nemin approached him with an insecticide. He confessed to Joo-Young that someone threatened him to feed Joo-Young with the pesticide. Joo-Young was confused by this sudden confession, so Nemin further explained that since he was born as a man in this world, he couldn't betray a close friend while pouring the bottle of pesticide on the floor that Joo-Young was cleaning. At this point, Nemin cares less about the consequences he's gonna receive by backing out of the favor from inmate 2163. But the most important detail was that the person who threatened him had a tattoo of the red flower dragon. With that, Joo-Young's senses heightened, which was enough to help Nemin out of such dire situations. Here they are, facing the OCD demon with the red flower dragon. To start off, Joo-Young provoked inmate 2163 by wiping his hands on his uniform. That was effective and got him really furious for being filthy, but he was all talk, and he didn't notice Joo-Young grabbing his neck and tackling him down on the ground. Joo-Young could care less if inmate 2163 were threatening to murder him, but the fact that he got a red dragon tattoo, Joo-Young could freely beat him up without feeling guilty. Namin was thankful that he was saved, so it was like hitting two birds with one stone. Before we could proceed with the most awaited fight, let's see inmate 2163's origin. He was once a promising rising star in martial arts with a signature move of grappling his opponent by the abdomen and squeezing as if it was about to burst. But in reality, it was a dirty play that blocked the opponent's hands so they couldn't tap out. He was that menacing and merciless. However, it was because of that particular fight that his opponent threw up in front of him. That was the last fight that people saw him doing his signature because, ironically, the rising star developed a critical weakness for a grappler, which is germophobia. Inmate 2163's opponent, who threw up, sought revenge. However, that same germaphobe guy was knocked out on the ground by Joo-Young, who was interrogating him to tell him about the heavenly dragon. But inmate 2163 was a little too occupied with how the bathroom floor was covered by the thing he hates most, germs. So he threw a punch at Joo-Young, but our protagonist was strong enough to counter it like it was nothing. Namin, who was watching the fight take place while hiding, was impressed at how Joo-Young was swatting inmate 2163's punches like flies. Inmate 2163 keeps on saying how he'll murder Joo-Young, not giving Joo-Young proper responses, so he decides to use shock therapy by grabbing a handful of the urinal's water and putting it in front of inmate 2163's mouth. As the scene shifts again to inmate 2163's flashback, we can see him getting disgusted by his own sweat, so he immediately goes to his locker. However, the moment he opened it, piles of trash fell, making him scream like a little girl getting jump-scared by a cockroach. Before he could do anything, his former opponent tackled him down from behind, a surprise attack. He knew that inmate 2163 had developed a severe germophobia that he could no longer grapple with. Seeing that inmate 2163 wasn't fighting him back, confirmed that the rumor was true, so he took this to his advantage. He hated inmate 2163 for humiliating him after throwing up in that arena, and since this guy is known for playing dirty, he gave him a bunch of trash. He shoved a bunch of trash down inmate 2163's mouth, to which he did his best to keep it close to the point that his teeth were bleeding. All that is clouding his brain is the dirtiness that his opponent gave him. He also went into anger mode, and he somehow made his dirty signature move again. That's what happened to our protagonist, who fell into the same fate as his former opponent. Now the tables have turned. Inmate 2163's grip was also a no-joke, especially since he's a former martial artist. Joo-Young was clearly struggling, and Namin could obviously see it. But since he's nothing but a weasel, he was hesitating whether to help him or not. However, he notices a change in the atmosphere when Joo-Young's struggle turns into a reminiscence about his childhood days. Back when his dad used to choke him out of fun to teach him how to fight. A hug that is tight enough to break his bones. It's nothing that he's used to, so Joo-Young knows how to get out of his signature, something that inmate 2163's opponents couldn't do. Inmate 2163 didn't expect him to turn the table so quickly to his advantage. Joo-Young gave thanks to his father for the talent he gave to him in fighting bear on the ground while he was peeing. Inmate 2163's spine deals most of the damage with that, while Joo-Young smiles at the look of his pained face. It was thrilling to see who would burst first, his spine, his arms, or his mentality. Inmate 2163 was screaming in pain that it was a surprise that no guard noticed it. He tapped out on Joo-Young's shoulder as a way to say that he had already given up, but Joo-Young was so heartless in the eyes of the dragon that he said he had not been taught about that. That's when hope completely disappeared from inmate 2163's face, so he did nothing but scream for his life. While the other inmates were disciplined enough to continue cleaning the building, these two idiots were still not done interrogating this demon. As payback, Namin put a funnel over inmate 2163's mouth while being restrained by a rope. He was so into the character of being Joo-Young's ally that he scolded his previous room leader for fiercely resisting after the beating that Joo-Young gave him. He was laughing that Joo-Young's shock therapy wasn't even effective, so they had no choice but to make things more intense just to get a word or two. Joo-Young doesn't want to do this, but they have no other options. If they want information about the Red Flower Dragon organization, then Joo-Young must also unleash his own dragon to keep this germaphobe guy alive. Inmate 2163 was struggling to escape, but there was no way he could get away with them. Namin told him to open his mouth for the special Mountain Dew going in, while Joo-Young was wondering what his juice would taste like. That was the most brutal torture for this poor guy, and after a few minutes of feeding, Inmate 2163 can now communicate. Hopefully, this time, he would answer him properly about all he knew about the Heavenly Dragon organization, his father, and this guy's organization. Looking back, Inmate 2163 remembered the time when he first got his tattoo. This fine-looking woman, who was also part of the organization, knew that Inmate 2163 had severe germophobia, so she calmly explained the process of tattoos. Furthermore, she said that it's a process where they stick needles into the dermis layer of the skin and inject the ink, and since he was a germaphobe, she assured him that it was hygienic. She also explained the meaning of the tattoo that he was getting, which was the Red Flower Dragon. She also explained why such a large organization accepts minors like him. She started off by pointing out that the dragon represents power and strength, while the flower symbolizes vitality and life. However, no matter how beautifully a flower blooms, it is bound to wither and fall to the ground someday. This is why the Heavenly Dragon organization is looking for the seeds that will grow the next generation. Minors and rookies are full of potential that adults don't have. Depending on the environment and experiences they go through, those rookies will grow tremendously. They recruit talents at an earlier stage to nurture and cultivate them within the garden of the organization. That way, the seeds they planted will later be the pillars and bloom beautifully as the flowers of the Heavenly Dragon. That was the experience of Inmate 2163, to which he told Joo-Young. Besides, he is just a low-ranking member of the organization, so he pleads to let him go. Upon hearing the organization's objective, it made sense in Joo-Young's mind why his father beat him up throughout his life as a way to train him to make him bloom faster. Namin sensed the menacing aura that Joo-Young emits, which smells like trouble. However, Inmate 2163 was curious as to why Joo-Young wanted to know about the organization, thinking that he wanted to join the Heavenly Dragon as well. Joo-Young's eyes narrowed upon hearing such an idea, but Inmate 2163 was so confident that he was right. He thought that Joo-Young was brave enough to challenge the Heavenly Dragon, and that's why he wasn't holding back and showing his strength to him. He thinks that Joo-Young was doing all of those to get on his good side, so he would recommend Joo-Young to the Heavenly Dragon organization. However, he was proven wrong when Joo-Young choked him so suddenly that he had no time to react. Inmate 2163 was so confused as to why this monster was still attacking him when he already told him everything. But this dude didn't realize that he hit a nerve on Joo-Young that pissed him off badly. In a span of a few minutes of torture, Joo-Young still made it on time to also do his chores. He was struggling to scrub off the dirt on the floor, but someone kneeled behind him and proposed with a bottle of bleach. Namin was acting so weird that Joo-Young asked him what he was doing this time, but that offering was thanks for dealing with the OCD demon. Now Namin could sleep soundly. Speaking of bleach, Joo-Young pointed out Namin's experience from the previous room when he was tortured with bleach. There's no way that people could survive after taking bleach, but miraculously, Namin did. It seems like he owes Joo-Young an explanation, so he explained that when a person was tortured, a foam would usually come out of their mouth, but in Namin's case, he faked it with soap water. He lied in that whole situation because he was desperate to be assigned to another room, so he planned it in advance. Still, what Inmate 2163 did to him was still pretty scary and traumatizing. But hearing that real story was crazier. Aside from that, Joo-Young said that Namin doesn't have to thank him because he helped him find the tattoo anyway, so they're even. After talking about Namin, he also wanted to know about Joo-Young. He heard that he was searching for a tattoo from a terrifying organization called Heavenly Dragon, so he curiously asked why Joo-Young was searching for it. This guy was so straightforward and replied that his intention was to end them all. Joo-Young was able to get 2 of the rookies, but he's having a hard time finding the rest. The juvenile prison is a massive place with people who have tattoos on their bodies, so Namin asked what all those people have in common. That sparked a brainstorm, and they concluded that Inmate 2163 and Zhongchan were both room leaders, so he narrowed it down to finding room leaders. However, he doesn't need to struggle so much because by next week, there will be a gathering of all room leaders, and it is called a day assembly. It seems like Joo-Young hasn't heard about it, so Namin explained that legally, the gathering happens every quarter, and all room leaders will gather to strengthen their relationship. However, in reality, the gathering is a talk about what happens within the prison, with all sorts of illegal conversations. In short, it's known as a criminal cartel. Given that most of the room leaders appointed are all strong, Namin advises Joo-Young to be careful because juveniles from all over the country gather in that place. Most of all, there is one person who is the most dangerous of all, so he must watch out for him, telling Joo-Young not to stand out. A week later, the one-day assembly came by so quickly, and every room leader was gathered up in that one room. Inmate 5521, with white hair, talked about how Jong-chan and the OCD bastard were completely defeated so easily. In that same room, a person with a red flower dragon tattoo informed me that the one who defeated those weaklings was a person named Joo-Young. It sparked curiosity towards our protagonist, while the others didn't want him to run rampant, so he proposed teaching him by beating him up like a dog. However, a big one with koi and lotus flower tattoos that seemed to be religious said that there's no need for violence to take place because God wants peace. However, at that same moment, the person they were talking about went in a little late but was holding a broken wood. Joo-Young's entrance stood out the most, which was the opposite of what Namin advised. He was so happy to see everyone he considered an enemy all gathered up in one room, then proceeded to charge towards the most dangerous guy inside and wasted no time in attacking him. He was as fast as Zenitsu, and most of the other inmates didn't have time to react at all, because this dude just broke the golden rule. Prior to Joo-Young going out for the other cell leader's neck, the prisoners were digging a hole outside the prison. They need to earn their keeps, so they must dig deeper, which they did. Meanwhile, the members of Cell 36 were talking and taking shade on the shaded part of the dirt. Namin told Mae-jium that Joo-Young would be going to the one-day assembly, so they better give him some words of encouragement. Mae-jium was confused at first, wondering what the fuss was all about. Even Joo-Young doesn't know the details either, so Namin is obligated to explain them. He said that the one-day assembly is a gathering approved directly by the prison warden for those who have dreams, like being a leader or a ruler with talent and potential. One-day assembly is a meeting between cell leaders, which is a dangerous place where illegal trade and their information are discussed. Namin isn't talking about local bullies but big boys who play significant roles in the Red Flower Dragon. He even heard that it's on a scale comparable to a giant criminal organization. After hearing how serious this is, Mae-jium turned to Joo-Young and told him to go safely. Namin was surprised that those were everything he could only say to Joo-Young, expecting him to have more sincerity because Joo-Young wasn't only going to small poops. Anyway, it is expected that Joo-Young will come across dangerous guys with no way back, so he had better not stir some trouble or everyone would be out for his neck. However, when Joo-Young went to the meeting, he did the opposite of what Namin said and stirred some trouble the moment he saw the leader, Park Do-won. It is his intention to dry up all the seeds with a broken shovel in his hand, aiming for Do-won's neck. Everyone was looking at him, stunned and shocked, while Joo-Young confidently said to come at him. But Do-won wasn't scared of him. He even looked him dead in the eye and said he refused. That confuses Joo-Young, so Do-won explained that under the pretext of maintaining order, Joo-Young must have believed that cell leaders can use violence, which made him act, relying on that belief. However, he missed the most important part. The three leaders he recently defeated had reasons to accept those fights, and they call that a justification. For Do-won, there's no benefit and no justification for responding to this fight. And so, if Joo-Young insists on swinging his fists recklessly and disrupting the order within the prison, then the other cell leaders won't let you live. After a few seconds of thinking, Joo-Young can say that if he were to recklessly act, then he might become a target for the other cell leaders. He already anticipated that to happen because if he were to turn everyone in prison against him, the chance of leaving that place unscathed, let alone taking control, would diminish significantly. Nevertheless, he is glad that it's now confirmed. Do-won stood up and walked past Joo-Young before pointing out that he knew from his actions that Joo-Young had no intention of stabbing him. But he was hostile towards the Heavenly Dragon. Joo-Young was surprised to know that, but Do-won didn't care about him and called him pathetic. Afterwards, the one-day assembly finally started. The guy with an eyeglass stated that Seon-ho, Jong-chul, and Kang Jeon were absent due to injury, and the cause of this incident was Joo-Young. Therefore, they announced him as the new leader of Cell 36. Everyone was murmuring about Joo-Young, giving their interest to them. Then, Do-won asked if Joo-Young had anything to say as the new cell leader. He responded by asking about the importance of being a cell leader, which confuses the others, but he proceeded to introduce himself. The way he talks makes prisoner 8256 think of him as rude, but the meeting must proceed, and they move on to another topic. It was mentioned that the revenue sources operated by cell leaders were known as stores, and a portion of the profits from these stores was given as tribute to the warden. However, the problem is that Park Do-won's gambling failed to deliver a portion of the tribute in that quarter. Do-won apologized for their error and assured them that they would deliver it by the end of the day. But another trouble was stirred up when the white-haired prisoner didn't let that topic die out so easily. He said that there's a strange rumor going around that all the games in the gambling den, which operates with big bets based on trust and fairness, were actually rigged. Do-won was confident in talking about that topic and said, "You know what happens if you get caught doing that here." He even challenged the white-haired prisoner that if his gambling den is a scam, they are free to cut off my head. The tension between them was strong, but the assembly had to proceed until nighttime. Back in the Auto Repair Vocational Training Center, where the gambling den was located, one guy was on the verge of getting screwed because he was losing his bets. There were groups of people in that area, and all were gambling. Prisoner 2457, Joo-Young, a gambling den dealer, was talking to Joo-Young. He was convincing Joo-Young that the games there are simpler than a regular house, and each seat has a different type of game. Since Joo-Young is a first-timer, he recommended he play the simplest game, which is the dice game. So Joo-Young accepted and said that he should try. But in his mind, he's thinking that if he were to stab him without cause, he would be the one to suffer, but in another case, it could mean that he would have a justification. It was his intention to beat out Do-won, even cut his throat, and it wouldn't matter because he's gonna do that the other way. Joo-Young smashed the dice in front of everyone and revealed a magnet inside the dice. Therefore, these guys are total scammers. Usually, a juvenile prison operates solely to rehabilitate juvenile offenders under strict management and supervision. That's what everyone outside knows. However, those who don't work at a juvenile prison or aren't a juvenile prisoner know that there's something more inside of it. Kwon Chang-suk, the 26th director of the juvenile prison, has turned the rehabilitation center into a den of crime where illegal activities run rampant, putting up a facade that deceives everyone that it's legal. Inside the prison are profit sources, primarily operated by inmates in leadership positions, in other words, the cell leaders. It is commonly referred to as store, and some of the profits from these operations are delivered to the warden. In return, what is given to the inmate leaders is the benefit and freedom that ordinary inmates can't even dream of, and it is hidden in that apple box that only the cell leaders can enjoy. Who would imagine that all of this happened in a place like a juvenile prison, where a criminal cartel formed? One of the stores is the gambling den, run by Park Do-won. It is a normal occurrence that one prisoner would go crazy on losing the momentum of winning, and even though they get a good grasp on the game before, the chances of winning would fade eventually. They're too addicted to gambling but would run out of something to gamble, and that's when Park Do-won would come along. Do-won would tell him that he would lend him something to bet on if they would give them collateral. In this case, the gambler refuses to give in, feeling offended that Do-won is looking down on him and luring him into debt. Back in the present time, when Joo-Young broke a die in hopes that he would find a magnet, he called gambling den a fraud. Joo-Young wasn't surprised when Joo-Young called them a fraud, looking at him in confusion. Joo-Young then took out the magnetic ball inside the dice and showed it to them as evidence that they had been manipulating the result. That made everyone murmur and talk about how nonsense that place is, hesitating if they can really gamble and trust. Joo-Young looked at Eun-ho dead and asked, "Am I wrong? You manipulate the dice with a magnet, and you can choose the number you want to come up with, right?" Eun-ho replied that he was wrong in his claim, showing Joo-Young that the real magnet was in his hand, just to show him he was wrong. He said that the bead he claims to be a magnet is used to stabilize the center gravity of the dice, meaning it's the weight of the dice. With the real magnet in hand, he told Joo-Young to drop the bead on the magnet, and if it fell just like that, then it was not a magnet but a normal bead. With that getting debunked, everyone was booing Joo-Young. Now that his claims are false, Eun-ho sweetly asks if they should try again, which they do, but Do-won remains wary of Joo-Young. After a few rounds of gambling, Joo-Young lost all of his money, and now he looks gloomy because of his bad luck. He ran out of money to bet on and was left with a crumpled paper, so they had to end it. However, someone else couldn't accept that they lost, so he made another fuss, saying that he got scammed and was being violent about it. Do-won had to interfere and pin him down at a window, asking if he had evidence to support his claim. But the man doesn't have anything and merely says that the odds of him losing are weird, and that is not enough evidence to support his claims. Do-won was looking at him fiercely, letting him know that it would be problematic if he were to cause a disturbance as it could affect the other customers. The man quickly apologizes for his actions, and Do-won also says that his actions were done for safety reasons. With that, he told everyone to continue and enjoy their game. Other people just laughed it out, saying there were many troublemakers that day, so they need to get better at the game instead of complaining. After that night of losses and troubles, Joo-Young and the others returned to their cells, where Namin asked how Joo-Young's experience in the casino had gone. Joo-Young looked down and said that all the money was gone, and he couldn't even find any evidence of cheating, which doesn't sound so productive. As for Namin and Naejeom, he asked them about their side, and they were happy to say that they successfully stole some cards from their table and brought them back to the cell to investigate further. It was thanks to Joo-Young drawing everyone's attention when he smashed the dice on the floor so they could easily steal the cards from another table. Namin was proud that his brilliant plan worked, but Joo-Young was embarrassed that he had stirred up some trouble only to be debunked in the end. Anyway, they examined the card and said that if it was cheating, they should be able to find something on that card. Meanwhile, back in the auto repair, also known as the gambling den, there was a poor guy who was beaten up by Do-won while he begged for his life. Do-won doesn't tolerate that man spreading rumors about his gambling den scamming people, so he was merely giving him a brutal punishment. After a few whiles of screaming in pain, he dropped the guy's head, and Yoon-ho came to apologize to Do-won that his customer, Joo-Young, had caused him trouble earlier. Do-won accepted his towel to wipe off the blood on his hands and face, replying to Yoon-ho that it wasn't his fault, encouraging him to work hard for his den instead. Then the name Joo-Young struck his mind, not forgetting how he has strong hostility towards the heavenly dragon to which he belongs. He doesn't mind it, really, as long as he won't interrupt his business with the casino. Back to cell 36, Namin found a potential flaw in the card, which might be a sign for the scammers to know which card their customers have. It was a small detail that 2 dots in the uniform pattern were in different sizes, which is possible to be a marked card here. The dealer could determine the front just by looking at the back. Joo-Young seems to buy it, so now he has evidence for justification. But Do-won would not let him run around so easily in his den. The moment Kim Jong-soo, a juvenile prisoner, was released, an anonymous man waved at him at the entrance and congratulated him for being released. Upon seeing the man, Jong-soo wondered who that might be. The man then put his arms on Jong-soo's shoulder and began to talk. There, the man mentioned his involvement in gambling inside the cell, but Jong-soo played dumb about it as if he didn't really remember. The man then puts the tofu he's holding in Jong-soo's mouth. At that moment, Jong-soo remembered his agreement with their cell leader. He signed a consent form for extraction in exchange for the collateral he had staked. Now, the man waves the agreement form in his face as he stares at it shockingly. The man then mentioned his height, weight, and how healthy he was and expressed how long he had waited for him. As Jong-soo couldn't believe what was happening, the man pushed him inside the van and locked him in. Afterward, we can see the man having a conversation with the cell leader. Jong-soo has an agreement. Park Do-won is broken for organ trafficking and sentenced to 2 years and 6 months in prison. Definitely, he's the one currently operating the gambling den inside the prison. The man thanked Do-won and expressed his concern regarding Do-won's long-term operation inside the prison. The man assured Do-won, but Do-won did not seem to need it. He was confident enough that if a problem arrived in his den, money could resolve it. Meanwhile, Joo-Young is in their cell, thinking about the fraud circulating in the gambling den. As he thinks about what his cellmates mentioned that they noticed in one of the cards, Joo-Young decides to go into the gambling den tonight and reveal the fraud behind it. When the night came, Joo-Young went to the den and was welcomed by Yoon-ho, the den dealer. There he asked for a table for trump cards. At that moment, he has one goal. In front of everyone's eyes, he will reveal the true nature of fraudulent gambling. But then, the process didn't go as smoothly as it could have. Do-won arrived at the den and appeared in front of our Joo-Young. As Joo-Young's eyes show his surprise, Do-won expresses that he's waiting for Joo-Young and offers a gameplay with Joo-Young. As Joo-Young asked Do-won, shock still visible on his face, Do-won then expressed his curiosity about the reason why Joo-Young targeted the heavenly god. Joo-Young showed him that he didn't have an intention of telling him his personal history. Upon hearing it, Do-won decided to state a condition. Joo-Young would tell it if he won the game. Joo-Young agreed with him. As the game started, they got the attention of the other juveniles playing around them. Some are wondering why the operator, Do-won, is playing by himself, and others can't believe it. Do-won then gave Joo-Young the free will to choose which game he wanted to play. Joo-Young took this opportunity and suggested playing the trump card. Do-won then suggested playing matching pairs, an easy game for beginners to enjoy, as Joo-Young mentioned that he never played the trump card before. In this game, they must turn over the card and match the same number. If they guess it is right, taking turns will continue, but if it's wrong, the turn passes to the opponent. The key is to remember the position of the card that was turned over and checked. Upon learning the mechanics and the signs on the cards, Joo-Young is confident that this game will be easy. In his mind, if he didn't know about it, he would have left without being able to play. The den became a gossip arena as the game started. Some were wondering who Joo-Young was. On the back of the other juveniles who are watching are Ji-young and their other cellmate, Nam-gu. They noticed that there was something wrong with the cards. The markings on the back of the card didn't exist. Right, our Joo-Young noticed it also now as he looked at the cards laid on the table in front of them. Do-won, on the other hand, noticed Joo-Young's bewilderment. There he mentioned that the card patterns are really pretty. He also mentioned that the gambling den only uses the highest quality card decks. Besides that, he also mentioned that there are several card games available for beginners, and for guests who have difficulty playing traditional gambling games, he advises them to try starting with a light game like Catch the Thief. At that time, Joo-Young knew that it was clear that Do-won knew that they had stolen some cards. There's no turning back now. The betting then started. Do-won, being the operator, bet tons of money. Joo-Young then told Do-won that he doesn't have money. Upon hearing it, they already know they offered Joo-Young collateral. They told him that as long as he has collateral, even though he doesn't have money, he can continue playing. The juveniles then began to wonder about it and couldn't even believe that it existed. There, they handed Joo-Young the consent form for extraction. They instructed Joo-Young to check the corresponding box of the parts of the body he wanted, and each body part has a corresponding amount as well. Do-won then began to tease Joo-Young for being scared. His face says it all that Joo-Young might cowardly run away because of his plot. His confidence was on the ceiling right now. His smile supported it. On the other hand, Ji-young thought there must be some fraud in this game too, which gave Joo-Young more chances of winning. But then, everyone was shocked by what Joo-Young did. Do-won's playful aura a while ago got tamed as he witnessed Joo-Young's move. Without hesitation, he signed the consent. In his claim, there's no reason not to do it. From the top of his head to the tips of his toenails, it is all in. As our Joo-Young declares his shocking decision to bet all his body parts, Do-won accepts it. Namin and Ji-young, on the other hand, can't hide their shock. They can't believe that Joo-Young is risking all of his pieces in such an obviously fraudulent gamble, and they question what Joo-Young is thinking right now. In a snap, Yoon-ho started the match. There, he retells the instructions again, and they will turn over their cards, emphasizing that this is a game where they have to match cards that have the same number. With Yoon-ho's words, the match started with our Joo-Young. Tension can be felt in the match as Joo-Young starts to turn over his first card, which is 8 spades. Then the next one is 9 of hearts. Given that it is different in numbers, it's Do-won's turn now. In his first turnover he got 9 of the clubs. And for the second, he got 9 hearts. He got it from the start. Someone mentioned that gambling is all about luck. But for Do-won, it's not. There's no way it's that because he already knows the placement of the cards by memorizing them. Arrange the cards in advance with the dealer, and playing the game with his memory. Now, with rims written on his face, Do-won started to turn over another card, and it's a wrong number. He's playing it safe. For sure, no physical evidence or fraud will be found because it's a very simple and complete scam. Joo-Young then turns over another card, but it's the wrong one. Do-won then turned over another card, and this time, he chose to make it right. Already 4 pairs of cards. In Do-won's mind, it's pathetic how Joo-Young's sitting there quietly without knowing anything and helplessly getting everything taken away. Now, a flashback runs in Do-won's mind. He's talking with his father before he goes to work. His father asks him why he loves his father the most. Do-won then mentioned that his father makes a lot of money. Upon hearing his son's response, he just tapped his son's forehead and laughed it all out. Do-won also laughs together with his father. His father then smiled at him and told him that he would work hard for his son that day. The root cause is why he's in his position right now. Before, for him, his father was the most trustworthy man in the world. But he's wrong. His dad, instead of the company, was on his way to the gambling den. He heard later on that he had fallen into a private loan debt of millions. And for him, he's like an idiot being deceived by a rigged gambling machine without even knowing it. His dad, on the other hand, can sense that he's in a fight with his mind while he is gambling. He's holding on to his son's words that day and has a goal to make a lot of money in the wrong way. Now, with all these thoughts in his head, given his position in life right now, Do-won knows to himself that he's not stupid like his dad. Instead, he chooses to be the one who cheats. As the other juvenile offenders were watching their game, some mentioned that our Joo-Young had no luck because he still hadn't gotten anything right. They all lose hope for Joo-Young and don't have the energy to do them anymore. This time, Joo-Young started to reveal his true plan. He turned over a card, and this time, our Joo-Young got it right. The audience saw it and started to pay attention to the game again, thinking that Joo-Young had finally gotten some luck. At first, Do-won was still calm, thinking Joo-Young was just getting some luck. But as Joo-Young continued to get his turnover right multiple times, he started to lose his sanity and question himself. Now, Joo-Young got it right 13 times in a row, 14 times, and this time, it would be the last. At this moment, Do-won can't believe this kind of thing is happening, because he knows that only he and the dealer are aware of the card placements. Only him and the dealer. With this realization, he looks at Eun-ho and finds him grinning towards him. Revelation now comes. Previously, as Joo-Young stayed in the den till the end of the day, he approached Eun-ho while Eun-ho was packing up. Joo-Young gave a message written on a crumpled paper, and he asked him to go behind the toilet. As Eun-ho arrived, he saw Joo-Young waiting for him. There, Eun-ho asks him what his agenda is with him. Joo-Young straightforwardly told Eun-ho that he knew that they played a trick on the cards. Upon hearing it from Joo-Young, Eun-ho played the innocent hut in his mind. Right at that moment, the culprit who stole the cards was in front of him. Joo-Young then stated the facts and confirmed to Eun-ho that he knew that he already changed the cards with regular ones with no markings. That's the reason why Joo-Young called him there, to make him his ally. This time, Joo-Young told him straight that he could save Eun-ho. Upon hearing it, Eun-ho runs out of words. Joo-Young continued spitting facts. He stated that gambling dealers like Eun-ho are working to repay the debt they owed to Park Do-won, borrowing money using their organs as collateral. Joo-Young then assured our speechless Eun-ho that he would pay back everything for him, but he needed to help him just this once. Eun-ho resisted at first and stated why he shouldn't flip back to Do-won. If something went wrong, he would be murdered. But still, Joo-Young manages to convince him by stating the reality. Given that the debt Eun-ho owes is quite a considerable amount, he can't repay all of it now that there's only a week left. There, he convinced Eun-ho and instructed him what he needed to do. In front of everyone watching, he needs to expose the truth of the fraudulent gambling. Now, going back to the present, as Joo-Young finished the game, he sarcastically told his last line and broadcast to everyone out there that he got lucky today because he memorized the entire card layout by working with the dealer. Upon hearing it, the juvenile offenders who were watching them started to form a commotion. As Joo-Young mentioned those words, reality hit them, which Eun-ho confirmed with his mouth. According to him, all the games that took place in the gambling den are scams. The methods that were used for each game, he can reveal everything. Upon hearing it, the people there started to ask Do-won to return their money, but they couldn't believe what they were hearing. Do-won started to deny all of it, but Joo-Young, in just a flash, lifted the table and intended to cut Do-won's head using it as he remembered Do-won's words. He permitted Joo-Young to cut off his head if his gambling den was a scam. At this point, another flashback comes back to Do-won's mind. The younger version of Do-won is inside their house. He's shocked as someone outside shouts and knocks because they're not opening the door. As Do-won stands in front of it, he hears the intention of these people. His father is gambling, and they're there to get the money he borrowed. At that moment, Do-won confronts his father. But seeing his father's situation right now, he lost his sanity. There, his father mentioned he didn't do anything wrong. He just did it because Do-won said that he liked it when he made good money. Do-won can't believe what his father said. And with that, because of the debt from gambling, his father ended up bedridden. Only then did he realize that without money, you can't protect your family. With those flashbacks in his head, he moves away fast in Joo-Young's cornered move and punches Joo-Young, making Joo-Young fly to the wall. This time, Do-won faced Eun-ho. There he showed Eun-ho his anger. For him, Eun-ho didn't just betray him, but also made him a con artist, and the price will be a lot for Eun-ho. There he chokes Eun-ho, and now he's struggling with his own breath. Even though he's struggling, he manages to tell Do-won that there's evidence to support the truth that Do-won is a con artist. But he's wrong. The evidence will vanish right now as the other dealer starts to run away with it. There, Do-won unleashed his anger on Eun-ho as he punched it so hard. In Eun-ho's mind, Joo-Young had already run away, but for the second time he got it wrong. Joo-Young appeared at Do-won's back and kicked him hard. As Do-won lay on the floor, Joo-Young said firmly that he didn't have any intention of running away, nor would he let anyone else escape. Simultaneously, Do-won, still conscious, had another flashback from his past. In a room, there he is sitting together with the anonymous man beside his father, who's lying on the bed, the only thing inside the huge, gloomy room. His father is still unconscious, and the man questioned him for ending up like that. Do-won, with a little cast of sadness in his eyes, started to retell the root cause of his father's present situation. He resented him, but still he's seen his father as a responsible person. And with that, all of his father's debt in gambling, the man paid it all off. Only then did he realize that without money, you really can't protect your loved ones. The man then tries to ramble into Do-won's mind. There he asked, now that the gambling debt is paid off, what's the point of taking care of a father who's unconscious, pointing out if his filial piety suddenly kicks in. But with fierce eyes he asked, does that even make any money? Going back to the present, Do-won raises again and tries to punch Joo-Young as strong and as fast as he can. He uttered firmly, there was no way that he would run away as long as his money was still there. Upon hearing it, Joo-Young is now tired of his words about money, which he had kept talking about a while ago, and he gives Do-won tons of punches. There, Joo-Young realized that Do-won didn't have any fighting talent. He punched Do-won upward and downward. All of the punches that he can give, he gives it all to him. While he's making Do-won receive all of his punches, he asks him to fight back, but then suddenly, Do-won isn't affected by all of Joo-Young's punches. He grabbed Joo-Young and gave him a strong kick on his stomach. Upon receiving it, Joo-Young's blood spits out from his mouth. As he endured the pain caused by Do-won's kick, he simultaneously received a strong punch from him and flew far away. As he stared at Joo-Young, he mentioned that guys like Joo-Young, who only use force, would end up working under him and getting paid. With anger flowing through his eyes, he asked our Joo-Young if fighting was really that important. This time, Joo-Young can be seen at the top of the car. Half of his body went inside through the front glass. As the other juvenile offenders witness it, they just give him a smirk. For them, Joo-Young's just started talking a while ago, and mockingly asked if he, the guy who had been knocked out a while ago, wasn't dead. Eun-ho, witnessing it, can't imagine what will happen. If things go on like this, even him, I don't know what will happen to Joo-Young. Given that moment when Joo-Young looks like he is dead in his situation, Do-won takes the chance to announce his special message to everyone. He started to apologize to everyone because of the commotion and told everyone that, as they had seen, it was just a minor incident, and there are no issues with their casino. There he assured them as well that they would soon be back in order. But what shocked them was that as things flowed nicely in Do-won's hand, they heard Joo-Young speak. Joo-Young told them that Do-won was right, the casino didn't run any scam games, and there's no reason for him to murder Do-won now. Do-won then looked at him and replied that regretting it at this point won't help. Even though Joo-Young's in his critical position, which they can really tell because of the only scene that they're seeing, Joo-Young still manages to utter words again. At that moment, Joo-Young disagreed with Do-won's statement because for him, there was never any need for justification in the first place. At that moment, Joo-Young gives his deadly line, which makes Eun-ho bewildered. As he confirmed that the casino is a place to play games, he told Do-won that from now on, they will play a game of hide and seek. There, he reminded Do-won to hide well because if he got caught, he would be out. The moment he stated the last lines, our Joo-Young raised himself from the broken glass and showed his bloody face. Joo-Young continues to walk and says again and again the phrase hide well. He can see his hair. Here he comes to catch him. Upon hearing what Joo-Young said and seeing him standing straight, Do-won can't believe it. There he picked up a dice as he questioned Joo-Young's litany. In this place, where everything he has built is stacked up for him, Joo-Young shouldn't think that he would run away. But then, Joo-Young grasped Do-won's hand and pulled it. As he pinned Do-won on the table, he told him that everything he had built up would turn to ashes. Do-won, even though he's pinned, just disagreed with Joo-Young. Subsequently, Joo-Young started his next game. It's roll the dice. In his first roll of the dice, it shows 3 dots, which means 3 rounds. Joo-Young started to punch Do-won, but Do-won still can talk, mentioning that Joo-Young's way of breaking him is such a ridiculous game. Even though his face is full of bruises, he still mocks Joo-Young. He told him that he's not like them, fools who mindlessly swing their fists. Do-won started to rise again, but Joo-Young's words hit him. According to Joo-Young, Do-won may have grand ambitions and plans, but it seems he lacks luck. Upon hearing this, Do-won's anger rises. As the dice Joo-Young rolled a while ago stopped, 6 dots showed up, which meant 6 rounds, and with that, Do-won receives 6 punches. Do-won's sight is now on top, and another flashback came. It's the day he got his tattoo. Facing the fine girl who's giving the tattoo to the members of the Heavenly Dragon, she's not only giving the tattoo, but she's the scout. Do-won knows it. At that moment, he put the bag full of money in front of the girl and asked her to get him into Heavenly Dragon. During that moment, Do-won knew that if he got their support, his plan would accelerate. At that time, he will be able to make an unbelievable amount of money. The girl then spins his sharp tattoo tool and expresses how unsure she is about it. Then she points out that she prefers a man who's willing to risk his life over money. Do-won grabs the sharp thing the girl is holding and cuts his neck. If it's for money, he can risk it all because, for him, his life means nothing. As the girl witnesses Do-won's dedication, he accepts him. There she asked him what he wanted from the Heavenly Dragon. Upon hearing the question, he asked the girl to send him to juvenile prison. Going back to the present, Do-won, who's now at the pick of losing his sanity and looks like a punching bag, asks everyone to move as he tries to run away. In his mind, as much as it infuriates him, he needs to retreat for now. The evidence of the gambling scam has likely already been burned outside, and Joo-Young is cursed that soon he will be in the hands of the other ward bosses. But then, as he rushed towards the exit, Mae-jeum faced him, mentioning that he brought back the evidence of the scam. And with that, holding the bag full of evidence, he throws it in the air, the money inside it, as well as the cards, dice, and other things scattered in the area. Upon seeing it, the juvenile prisoners wondered what was with the stuff spilled out of his bag. In their eyes, it's just an ordinary game tool, but their blindness was halted by Mae-jeum. He instructed them to look closely. There he mentioned that's what the dealer who just escaped was holding, and that is the evidence that the gambling den is a total scam. As Mae-jeum reveals all of it, Nam-gu can't help but be amazed by Mae-jeum's usefulness. The revelations got into everyone's mind, and think about the money that they'd lost. One by one, all of them asked to return their money back. Do-won, on the other hand, can be seen on the floor, grasping the scattered money around him. He didn't want to let go of all the money. For him, it's all his. It's the money he earned with his own hands. In a snap, Joo-Young went near him and spilled oil all over Do-won. There's this one last game left he wanted to play. The name of the game is to endure the electric shock. As Joo-Young flicked, the electricity flowed to the electric prod. As Do-won looked at him with shock, he asked Joo-Young to halt because the money had oil and asked him to not do it. Still, Joo-Young slapped him with his words. Like what he said earlier, everything Do-won has built up will turn into ashes. But then, Do-won fainted before the electricity touched his body. The juvenile prisoners who witnessed the whole thing can't believe that Do-won got kicked off. But in the end, their attention got locked up on the money, which was scattered all over the floor. Now, an anonymous man showed up, his eyes covered with long white hair that reached his nose. He's smiling as if he's expecting all of this to happen, looking at Do-won, who's still unconscious and helplessly lying on the floor. 1 year and 2 months later, inmate number 7849, Park Do-won was released. Although he experienced failure in prison, thanks to that, we were able to use him as a lesson and draw a bigger picture. But not everyone has a chance to start all over again. As Do-won steps outside the gate, the man who's behind the organ extraction waves at him. He's also the anonymous man who paid his father's debt way back then. Now holding a tofu, he waved at Do-won. There he recognized Do-won's hard work. Do-won accepts the tofu, but he also bid his apologies, mentioning that he couldn't supply it anymore from the inside. He then assured the man that he would get settled quickly on the outside and asked the man to wait a little bit. The man agreed with him that he must get settled, but before that, he mentioned the money Do-won borrowed. Do-won then said the obvious thing, that he doesn't have money right now, but it's not a problem for the man. He then pushed Do-won inside the white van and underwent organ extraction. Going back inside the prison, Joo-Young, together with Mae-jeum and Nam-gu, is facing the anonymous man whose eyes are covered by his white hair. The anonymous man snuck into their room now, holding the only picture Joo-Young has together with his friend. He's mocking her, asking if she's the girl who died in a car accident. Joo-Young, in a snap, grabbed the man's mouth and asked for a pillow, and instructed them to make sure no screams echoed through the prison walls. 1 mom, 2 moms, 3 moms. The man with the eye covered with his white hair counted as he questioned how many mothers were there. The man is full of boredom, asking if there is anything fun going on. In a snap, he mentioned the term dopamine rush. When he sees Joo-Young being violent with another juvenile prisoner, it causes him to be excited. Going back to the present, the man struggled with Joo-Young's grip and created noises. The moment Joo-Young is about to punch him all out, the man shows him a sketch of the dragon tattoo of a heavenly dragon that Joo-Young made. The man confirms Joo-Young if those are the ones Joo-Young is looking for and offers help. The man told Joo-Young that he could chop all those dragons for him. Joo-Young got intrigued by his claims. But first he picked up a photo of Joo-Young with his childhood friend on the floor. He mentioned that they should clear up any misunderstandings first. The man told him that he noticed the photo fell inside the sketchbook and that there was no other intention behind it, so he asked Joo-Young to take a look at it, because he is a benefactor who wants to help Joo-Young. As the man paused and faced Joo-Young the photo, Joo-Young grabs it and drives the man away. The man then questioned Joo-Young's decision. He mocked him in front of his face. According to him, as a leader, he's free to fight in this prison. But if he charges in without a plan, he will get murdered by the other leaders without anyone knowing. In this juvenile prison, there are way more dangerous people than they think. And at the end of his litany, he asked Joo-Young if he was still going to refuse his offer. Joo-Young processes the information, and the man is saying it right now. Based on his judgment, he can't be trusted. By suddenly appearing out of nowhere, he's making such an offer out of the blue, wondering what the man who will get out of it by helping him will be. Now the man does a ridiculous thing. Right now, he's blending the metal screen on the window as if it's not that hard. Naminggu can't believe what he's seeing and tells the man that he will get charged with property damage too. Upon thinking about the things, Joo-Young asked the man directly what his intentions were and what his real goal was. The man then looked at Joo-Young and honestly told him the truth. With a grin on his face, he told him that the only thing he wanted was a dopamine rush. The next day, inside the Juvenile Detention Center auditorium, the juvenile prisoners are mesmerized by the beauty they're seeing on the stage. They're all looking at the girls' chorus of the chapel who's currently singing on the stage. For them, in this whole place, reeking of sweaty boys, there are women, not only women but pretty women. There, the prisoners jokingly mention that the Holy Spirits fill them and praise the Lord. It happens that the choir is from the Grand Cathedral. Joo-Young, on the other hand, is just watching them silently. Joo-Young looked at the label at the top, and there he saw the word Heavenly Cathedral. And with that, a flashback of memories flows in his mind. His childhood friend, Da-Yen, age 17 at that time, is walking on the aisle and repeatedly mentions that she should hide well because she will find him. Da-Yen then opens the small stockroom, and as she expected, there's where Joo-Young is. He slept again there. Da-Yen asks him the obvious if Joo-Young's sleeping there, and she gets stoned by what Joo-Young told her. He's sleeping there until she wakes him up. Da-Yen preached at him, mentioning that it gets cold there at night. But Joo-Young just told her that anywhere is better than at their home, which leaves Da-Yen sad and speechless. Seconds after silence, Joo-Young hears something. The sound of the door is opening. That time, Joo-Young asked Da-Yen if she had brought someone else, but based on Da-Yen's look, she didn't. And right now, she has a guess about who the person might be. It's Yoonha. And she's right, it's Yoonha. She's currently shouting her name, telling her that the sister hurriedly went back to the orphanage, and if Da-Yen goes late, she'll be scolded. Joo-Young and Da-Yen both heard what Yoonha said. With that, Joo-Young called Da-Yen to tell her to go, but he was shocked by what Da-Yen did. She entered the small cabinet, which looked like a stockroom, and automatically went near Joo-Young. Joo-Young asked Da-Yen what she was doing right now. Da-Yen just asked him to be quiet because if they got caught, they would be cleaning the cathedral for a week. The flashback in Joo-Young's mind was halted in that scene. As he sat in front of the stage, he heard the other juvenile prisoners' comments about one of the choir members. According to them, she has a radiant glow and a sweet voice. The other juvenile prisoners were intrigued as well by who they were talking about. And there it is. The Joo-Young also saw the fine lady Seong Yoonha. And with that, Yoonha saw Joo-Young as well. She's in shock and blushes at the same time. In the prison's canteen, the choir members were tasked to distribute food for the prisoners. The girls witness how terrifying the prisoners are. Even though they came there to spread faith, it seems like there's no hope in there. There, one of the girls questioned why there was a need for her to serve them. Indeed, for her, those kinds of people don't even deserve a bowl of rice. But then they were halted from what they were saying as they saw the most religious person inside the prison. With tears in his eyes, he solemnly thanked the Lord for the food. He also thanked the girls. They both were shocked and concluded that the man must be a Catholic. Simultaneously, Yuna and Joo-Young are sitting side by side in the stockroom. There they have a conversation regarding them being left by Da-yeon. During their high school years, there was such a gorgeous girl, Seong Yunha, from her first year. Indeed, she looks even prettier in person. In students' minds, why would a goddess like her come to their second-year floor? They're questioning who she could come there to see. And in a snap, their questions were answered when she approached Joo-Young. There she asked Joo-Young why he was not replying. Joo-Young then asked her if something had gone wrong. Upon hearing it, Yunha got a little stressed. But she knew Joo-Young hadn't checked her message. Yunha then told Joo-Young that he had gotten a lot of gift vouchers for her birthday last year, and it was hard to use them all by herself. He asked Joo-Young to help her out a little. But then, Joo-Young told Yunha that he already had plans with Daeyeon that day. Joo-Young, as he waved his hand and bid goodbye to Yunha, told her that he would help her out next time. And upon hearing it, a grim face flashed through Yunha. Going back to the present, as Yunha talked to Joo-Young, she's now asking the same question. Why did Joo-Young never reply to any of her letters despite him being lonely because of what happened to Daeyeon? Joo-Young then asked Yunha if there was something wrong. Upon hearing it, Yunha laughed a little. Joo-Young was just the same as always. As Yunha called Joo-Young, both of them got alerted as they heard people conversing with outsiders in the stockroom. It's the two police talking with each other. Luckily, the two of them hurry out because of the lunch boxes the sisters are handling. Yunha, upon hearing it, got snapped by reality. There she bid her goodbyes to Joo-Young. With that, Joo-Young told her to meet outside in the next 3 years. But then, Yunha told him that she would come back again next week because she had agreed to do regular volunteer work every Sunday at their church. And with a smile on her face, she told Joo-Young that she was glad that they would see each other often. As Yunha goes back to the canteen, she offers that she will take care of the cleanup. But then, the other girls got envious of how the prisoners treated Yunha. They're treating her like a saint. For them, seeing her act like that with a criminal, Yunha really has a strong stomach to the point that it's already disgusting. They continue talking with each other, and they are about to be convinced that the rumor about her could be true, that Song-Yun has been frequenting a motel. Little did they know that Joo-Young was listening to them and couldn't believe what he was listening to. Yunha didn't know that. Right now, she's laughing with the prisoners. Afterward, the juvenile prisoners can be seen yawning during the homily of the sister. There's questioning right now when this will end, but then their boredom in the homily ended when the choir members went out. They're not wearing their usual choir attire, but they're wearing instead an outfit for their groovy performance, which makes the prisoners hype. Now they all dance and dance till they are all tired. Subsequently, there are these two prisoners who have a bad plan with the girls. They're planning to pretend to sneak into the waiting room. Little did they know Joo-Young heard all of their conversation. After the performance, the choir members were praised by the sister. They really did great since all they could hear during that time was cheering. Meanwhile, the two sneaky prisoners were about to enter the room when Joo-Young suddenly showed up behind them and took them down. Then the stone Hashira appeared to Namgoon Joseph and took matters into his hands as well. Yunha was scared about the fuss, and when she realized what was happening, she hid behind Joo-Young's back. A week after that incident, we can see Joo-Young moving the donations in the inventory when he suddenly got attacked by 3 men with weapons. It was unsure why they sabotaged him, but those men are just plain NPCs in this manhwa and are easily defeated. However, a guard heard the noises, and when he entered the room, Yunha screamed and pointed at Joo-Young, saying that he was attempting to do something to her while covering her body. As we move on, we can see a flashback of the Saintess Yunha, who is not looking so saint-like in this scene. Together with her is an old pastor who brags about how much money he has. He even complimented how Yunha looked prettier without makeup before inviting her over to his bed. However, a big buff guy entered the room with them and pointed out that this pastor was having an illegal meeting. Most importantly, he was about to attempt something blasphemous despite being a pastor. This big buff guy was Namgoon, and Yunha was in with the plan, saying that she caught everything on video with her handbag. Namgoon was doing divine punishment on his own hand, and it seems like he does this regularly on behalf of the heavens on earth. So you might say it's the same situation as Joo-Young, seeing that after the earlier incident with Yunha, he was put in the confinement room. The guard talked to him, asking if he does those things with visitors. He doesn't care if Joo-Young receives special treatment from the chief, but since that matter involves an outsider, solitary confinement is unavoidable. There was even a CCTV in that room so the Ministry of Justice could see every move, so he couldn't let him out of there. He couldn't believe that such a thing happened in a prison of all places, which made MC think about what had happened earlier. He was confused as to why Yoon-ha did such a thing. That same afternoon, there was another church schedule, but Yoon-ha wasn't present because she was with Namgung in the parking lot inside the bus of their choir. He greeted her because it had been a while since they'd seen each other, but Yoon-ha kept her face emotionless. She asked if it was really okay for an inmate to be wandering around like that. But Namgung explained that they pay a monthly fee to the warden for a certain level of freedom. And still, Yoon-ha is something worth every sacrifice. However, that's not why they were there to talk about it. Namgung reminisced about when they were like Bonnie and Clyde, partners in crime by conducting heretical trials. Namgung has always seen Yoon-ha as a reliable supporter, which is why he asked her for help with a certain matter to Judge Joo-Young. So what happened that moment with 3 men sabotaging him? It feels as if they were just buying time by threatening him. The real goal was to use Yoon-ha to frame him for the attempt of assault. However, when the officer questioned her about what happened, it seemed like her mind changed at the last minute, and she told the officer that Joo-Young had saved her from the 3 men who were out to get her. The guard didn't say much and ordered everyone to get everyone out for now. This is why Joo-Young didn't really understand what was happening, and he had to be confined without much explanation from Yoon-ha, so he was stuck there thinking about the possibilities. With that, he called out for the guard that is on duty for a request. The guard approached his cell and asked about his request, hoping it wouldn't be noticeable because of the CCTV, so Joo-Young said that he wanted to call someone for him. On the other hand, Namgung pointed out that he noticed Yoon-ha hiding behind someone else to avoid him on the first day they visited the prison last week. He can tell that Yoon-ha has been captured by the heretics, which is why he sets her up for an opportunity so she can directly judge the heretics with her own hands. However, given that Yoon-ha changed her mind at the last minute, she decided to waste that given opportunity. Namgung's aura got so heavy that it made Yoon-ha tremble in fear because she wanted to stop the judgment thing with him. She has already done everything he wants outside the prison, but Namgung was holding on to the video he had to blackmail Yoon-ha into making her do work for his sake. All he wants is for her to continue helping him like she has always done. But then Yoon-ha had enough and decided to talk back. She said that she was going to report him for the crimes he committed. It's unacceptable for Namgung that the rosary he's been gripping broke and pinned down Yoon-ha. He wanted to teach her a divine lesson by purifying her, and in that position, I think we all know what's going to happen. Yoon-ha screamed at the top of her lungs, but no one was around at that moment because the choir was doing a performance for the inmates, so it was just the 2 of us. Or that's what he thought. Someone suddenly opened the bus's door and entered with a menacing aura that outweighed Namgung's. He looked at him in confusion because he was supposed to be in solitary confinement, but it seemed like he had to deal with Joo-Young first, so he excused himself to Yoon-ha and locked the door behind him with a push of a button. Earlier that time, when Joo-Young asked the officer to call someone for him, Joo-Young asked for one of the psycho inmates who pledged he would help him. It was the white-haired dude, inmate 5521. The moment inmate 5521 saw Joo-Young alone in the confinement room, he felt envious that he had gotten a private room and didn't really see it as confinement. He likes how cozy it looks, so he was shaking the bar of the door because he wanted to get in too. That's how crazy he is. However, Joo-Young wanted to get into business immediately because he was not there to joke around. He mentioned that inmate 5521 said he was willing to help him out and wanted him to show how he could help him. Inmate 5521 fell silent for a few seconds before asking Joo-Young what he needed to do because he was ready to do everything for him. Thanks to him, Joo-Young was able to interfere with Namgung in his fake religious act to have an excuse for assaulting Yoon-ha. Joo-Young can't have this fake bastard run rampant around Yoon-ha, Do-Yeon's friend. Namgung still insisted that what he was doing was just a religious activity. He claimed that it would be hard for Joo-Young to understand heretics, so Namgung was readying himself to launch toward Joo-Young, but he did the same and landed the first punch at Namgung. Joo-Young refuses to believe every word that comes out of Namgung's mouth because what he did to Yoon-ha is a crime deserving of being torn apart. Joo-Young kept punching him non-stop, and Namgung admitted that it was a good punch. It's been a while since he was targeted in the vital points so accurately, so he wanted to know where he learned that from. As for him, Namgung didn't learn his skills from humans because God solely granted him what he possessed. He is so deep into the religious act that it seems like he manifests a sturdy body because Joo-Young can't seem to make a donut on his chest. With his so-called blessed body, Namgung threw a punch at Joo-Young that made the bus shake frantically because of how chaotic the happenings inside were. The punch was so strong that Yoon-ha covered her mouth in shock with tears threatening to fall. That punch got Joo-Young lying on the floor, while Namgung insisted that he was an angel tasked with judging heretics, and he got sister Yoon-ha to vouch for him. But Yoon-ha was looking rather scared and terrified, and before we know what happened to Joo-Young, let's go back to years ago when Yoon-ha and Namgung first met. It all started at a Bible gathering where religious people would meet up and talk about their problems and happenings in life as a way to let go of the burden. Yoon-ha was within a circle, and they were praying about her problems in life, wishing to live with her mom someday. After that, the members of the circle wished her well in life, hoping they could pay off their debt. Before they parted ways, they said they would pray for her, and Yoon-ha thanked them. But behind her was Namgung, silently looking at her dress in another way, thinking like how an offender would think and disguising it as something sacrilegious. After that, Yoon-ha was walking in a deserted hallway when she was suddenly stopped by Namgung. He introduced himself to Yoon-ha and mentioned that he participated in the Bible camp last week, so he's a newbie. He also mentioned that he overheard Yoon-ha's circumstances, and knowing that it's about money, he proposed that he knows a way to solve it. The easiest way to pay off a debt, aside from organs, is by giving out certain organs that don't have to be extracted. According to Namgung, this task is a gracious act to judge heretics, and he sees it as fitting for Yoon-ha's aptitudes. Back in the present day, when Namgung was fighting Joo-Young, he could literally lift him off his feet. He was about to throw a punch at Joo-Young when he was suddenly hit by Yoon-ha, who defended Joo-Young as much as she could. That made him pissed though, so he threw Joo-Young back to the driver's seat that it broke the glass. Namgung blames Joo-Young for staining Yoon-ha's faith, and Namgung's way of bringing her back to grace is by slapping her across the face. But now that he got rid of Joo-Young, the pest, Namgung went back to his first mission, which was to purify her. Those words were scary enough, and seeing this big gorilla man marching towards you is even scarier. However, when he took another step, he suddenly felt an aching pain inside his body that made him kneel on one knee. That's when he started coughing blood, and Joo-Young was proudly standing behind him as he said that even the blessed body couldn't possibly endure internal injuries when Joo-Young was punching him in the vital points. However, looking at Joo-Young, even he doesn't look so good either, but the physical pain he is in is nothing compared to the pain that Yoon-ha has endured ever since then. With the chemicals that are used to clean that bus, Joo-Young took one of the bottles where he declared to Namgung that offenders like should be punished physically and chemically, and most of all, they need to be completely castrated. Joo-Young himself will also be doing God's work by eliminating one problem at a time, and this time, it's Namgung who will pay the price for putting up a face that uses religion in his blasphemous acts. That's it for today's recap. Give us a like and subscribe for more videos. See you next time.